Hello, and thank you for buying a Sweet Blossom by Martha embroidery kit to make your own floral tea towel. So inside the kit, you're going to find this embroidery hoop. The card here has your 3 different colored threads. The green is for the stem and the leaves. The coral is for the outer part of the flower, and the dark pink is for the inside, and then a needle. You also have about an 18 by 18 inch tea towel, and that is what we will embroider on. And then we also have the pattern that we'll use with notes for what kind of stitch you'll use for which part. Let's get started. To begin, we're going to take our tea towel and fold it just in equal parts so that we know the corners. So this tea towel is already folded in half. We'll fold it again, and then one more time. This way we know exactly where we want to put our design. So this is what we're going to embroider. We're going to take our sticky paper design. This paper is water soluble, so once we're done embroidering, we'll actually soak it in some water and the paper will disappear. It's also really easy to embroider with. So you're able to stitch through the water-soluble paper and the fabric at the same time pretty flawlessly. So we have stuck it on, and we're about ready to get the hoop on. Perfect. Now we're going to put the hoop on the fabric. So this hoop is about 5.5 inches in diameter. You can go bigger or smaller based on your preference, but this is a great kind of starting hoop to work with. You're going to slip the inner hoop piece, so it comes in 2 pieces. There's an inside and an outside. You'll take the inner one, place it underneath your fabric, and then your top one, open it up a little bit, and press down. The goal here is to, one, make sure we don't have any other fabric caught in there. Perfect. You also want to make it pretty tight. So you should be able to kind of hear that taut noise. You want it as tight as possible. This paper is not going anywhere, so you can tug and pull at it as much as you need. It's pretty sturdy. And that feels about as tight as we can go. And pull it. Great, now we'll get our thread and needle ready. So to begin, we've already put the thread through the needle, and the thread that we're going to start with for the stem is the green one, number 470. And we'll begin by knotting the end. A simple knot, 1 is enough. You can do 2 for save, good measure, but 1 is typically good enough. So we'll knot that, and the thread you should do about 2 to 3 feet long, and then the tail from the needle 5 to 6 inches so it doesn't get in your way. We're going to start with the chain stitch, which is labeled here on your cheat sheet, your pattern. What we're going to do is we're going to take the needle, we're going to start from the back and pull all the way through until you feel the knot. You don't need to tug too hard. Then take your needle, and you're gonna go pretty close to the hole that you just pulled the thread through, but not the same one. So fairly close as you can get. You'll pull so that you have about 1 inch or 2 left. And then you'll take your needle and you'll come through the back, slightly in front of where you just pulled those 2. So if you can see, the needle is coming just slightly in front of the holes there, and then you'll pull your thread in front. So it's kind of coming through the eye of the thread. Pull, taut but not too tight. You don't want to pull it through. So it kind of looks like a little chain for the chain stitch. And then you'll do the exact same thing. So come slightly in front, or excuse me, slightly next to the hole you just pulled your thread through. Leave about 1 inch or 2. And then slightly in front again. Pull your thread in front, we'll just check the back. Got caught on a little bit of fabric in the back there. And you'll repeat that process again. So go basically where you just came through, hold the thread, and then poke the needle through. You can also think of this as, so where this string is coming through, think of this as A, and B is your second one, the second hole, and then C is that third move. So A, B, C. We'll do just a few more. Right next to it. And come through. As you're embroidering, you might find or notice that your fabric is starting to get a little loose. Remember to keep it as tight as possible. So just pull on the edges here and kind of have that top noise, kind of like a drum. We'll do 2 more. Another tip too, so you'll use about 2 to 3 strands of thread if you've cut them about 2 to 3 feet. Recommendation would be to cut them ahead of time, and if you have spare needles, kind of thread them already so you can just keep going instead of having to pause and rethread, because that can sometimes slow down the momentum. Okay, so we're just about ready to finish this first stem. So we have 1 or 2 last chain stitches left. Looks like just 1. So to finish it, we'll pull it, and instead of going right next to it like we were before, you'll come pretty much right in front. And what it'll do is kind of tuck it right in. Then on the back, because we want a neat finish because it'll be a towel so people will be able to see the back, we're going to take the needle and we're going to thread it through one of the holes and then just make a simple knot. It's important not to pull too tight here, just nice and snug. And I usually do 2 or 3. Once it's knotted though, it won't go anywhere. Oops. And they will stay knotted when you wash it too. So pull it pretty tight, and then we'll snip it, and then we'll move on to the next step. So the next step that we're going to do is one of the leaves. And for this stitch, you have lots of options for leaves. Leaf stitch, long stitch, satin stitch. What we're gonna do today though is called a fishbone stitch. A fishbone stitch. So you're gonna come in through the back at the top of your petal. You're gonna pull it all the way through like we did last time. And then you'll come down about 1/3 of the way. And as you get used to embroidering, you can really decide if you want to go shorter or longer, depending on the look that you want. And then you'll pull it pretty tight. Then you're going to come just to the side of that initial thread, pull it through all the way up. And what you're going to do is just come slightly to the other side of that middle stitch. Pull it down so it overlaps that first stitch that we pulled through. Then you're going to do the same thing, but on the other side. So we started on the right, and now we're going to go on the left, or started on the left, and now we're going to go on the right, whichever way you're looking at it right now. Pull it all the way through, and then you're going to overlap the 2 onto the other side, so you're kind of crisscrossing like a fishbone. So you'll keep alternating and following the outline, and then always just going to the side of your center line. This stitch is nice too because it creates a really tight pattern, which helps it stand up too if you're using it in the kitchen or and in the wash. The leaf will stay, it'll hold its shape really well. So we are just at the end here, and you'll kind of have to judge it based on how you threaded it down about what the next or the best way to end it would be. So you might not have to alternate. So for instance, you can see here there's a little bit of black just on the one side. So I actually won't alternate. I'll just try to fill in with the thread on the one side until the leaf looks full and complete. That works. That works fine for this. So now we need to end it so very similar to how we ended the chain stitch, and you can see the back, it's pretty tight and a clean finish, which is what we want for a towel. But same thing, we'll just loop it through some of the already established thread to make a knot. Again, you don't need to pull it too tight, just snug. I like to do 2. And then for this, I like to hide the thread, again, because it's a towel and people will be able to see it. So then I usually just, whichever angle makes the most sense or that you're able to do, I just try to weave it in, weave it through, and then I'll snip it here. So then you're kind of hiding the thread. And then that's that. So now we'll move on to the next step. So now we are going to show how to do the center of the flower and then the outside. So the center is going to be a long stitch or a satin stitch, basically just really smooth lines. So we'll follow what we have in here. So again, we're going to come through the back, pull it nice and snug, and then go directly across. So you'll see different ways of doing it. People might start on one end and come through. I like to start in the middle to kind of establish the center point. And then you'll come right next to it, similar to what we did for the fishbone. Oops. As close as you can get. And then smooth, and then come back down. If there's a little bit of a gap, it's fine. We can come through at the end and fill it, make it kind of full looking. And then next to the previous one. And then you'll get shorter. Shorter each time as we fill in the circle. And it's okay if it's not a perfect circle. It's kind of the beauty of this pattern design, is because it's a flower and you can tell that the petals, this itself isn't a perfect circle to mirror a real flower. So there's kind of built-in imperfections to kind of hide any mistakes or not perfect lines. Okay, we'll kind of call it at that, and it's actually filled out pretty well. So we won't spend too much time trying to fill in any gaps because it's looking pretty good. So now I just took the thread and brought it over to the other side, and we'll fill in the other side of the circle here. All right, might be the last one here. There we go. Easy. Same thing to tie it off. We will just kind of loop it off, knot it off the already established lines, and we'll do 2. And again, just kind of hide the thread, and then snip as close to the edge as can. Great, and we'll move on to the next step. Alrighty, now we are on one of our last stitches to learn. And this one is called a seed stitch. And it's kind of fun because there's not much rhyme or reason, and you don't really have to make it look perfect because all the stitches are going to kind of overlap. But what we'll do is we'll start with creating our border. And for this, you do want to try to make the current stitches the same length. So basically what I'm doing is coming up through the back. This is just your standard straight stitch. So coming up through the back and then going down into the same hole that the other thread came through. Okie doke, so we are our last one for the petal, and you're gonna go in the same spot that that very first one started in so that it's a nice closed circle. Oops. Just like that. And now we'll start the seed stitch. So the seed stitch is pretty much what we were just doing. The fun part is, again, there isn't really much rhyme or reason. So a lot of the seed stitch leaves a lot of white space, and that's not the case for here. We're gonna do a lot of overlapping because we wanna fill in this whole circle. So I'm just gonna go in and out just like we were before. So in through the back and then down, and you're just gonna fill in this petal all the way. And you can see the stitches are going in all different directions. I do like to keep about the same width just so that there is a little bit of consistency. And regarding the center part, why don't we do a few there? So we'll get as close to it as possible. For this, I even try to go underneath because I really want to keep the integrity of that shape. And if you go underneath, it gets as close as possible but doesn't impact the shape at all. So we are making progress on the seed stitch. It does take a little bit longer than some of the other ones, but my thread is just about done. So you'll want to leave yourself, 3 to 4 inches so that we'll see where the last stitch is. And I usually put my needle pretty close so that I know where it is. Pull the needle through, and you can either knot off that other stitch that you were working with, or what I like to do is just tie them together. It helps create a pretty clean look too. And then, again, just knot them together. 2 is good. And then trim them as close as you can so that they don't get woven in. And then, you can't even really see it, you'll keep going forever. Because these seed stitches, we're covering a lot of ground with this stitch for this petal. Okay, so we are just about done with our seed stitch. So you can see filled in, and any of those dark spots, again, will be white once we soak this in some water and the paper dissolves. So just kind of spot checking any areas that do look like there are gaps, because again, some white space is good, but you don't want too much. And if you want it completely covered, you can fill in as much as you want and or need. You have plenty of thread in the kit. Yeah, looks good. So then to tie it off, very similar to what we were doing before. Kind of pull it through the other fabric. Oops. Get a knot. And then I want it to be tight, so we'll kind of go through a few more so that it lays flat. There we go. And then snip it as close as you can. And that's that. So then we'll go ahead and we'll finish the other petal, and then it's the exact same thing on the other side, just a different shape with this petal, but you'll still do your outline first, fill in with the seed stitch, and then here you have your long stitch. So we'll go ahead and finish this up, and then we'll see the final product at the very end. Now that we've finished both stems, all the leaves and the 2 flower buds, it's time for the paper to come off so that we can let the towel air dry and get ready. So fill a sink or a bin full of cool to cold water and get it as wet as possible. Oftentimes I will place it in the water and let it soak for 2 to 5 minutes. By that time, you can kind of already see some of the paper is coming off and it will just dissolve, so you can let it soak. And then when you get towards the end, you can go ahead and run it under the water to make sure you get all the little bits and pieces off, but already I can't feel the paper. It's already starting to dissolve. So once it's all dissolved, I let it air dry overnight. I try to avoid the dryer at this point, especially if I'm gifting this to somebody, but I'll let it air dry and then iron as normal. So we'll check back after it's dry. Now the towel has dried, so here is the final product on the tea towel. Perfect.